Thank you so much for joining us today, Jacob. This is Jacob Shriar, the Director of Content from Office 5, and he has a lot of different names, so maybe he can talk a little bit about that. They're quite busy over there. And he's on a mission to make everyone happier, healthier, and more productive at work. He spreads knowledge through blogs, ebooks, guides, and other helpful resources. And he's been featured on the radio and has done over 50 interviews with leaders from dynamic companies like Netflix, Zappos, Rackspace, and Wix, and how they build incredible company culture, which is really what we want to talk about today. He's passionate about web, mobile, and he loves marketing. And he's also passionate about startups. He started his own social media company at the age of 18, which I guess was what, just a couple of years ago? And he's an entrepreneur at heart. And so he loves learning and he continually takes online courses. And he lives and works in Montreal, which is where Office 5 is housed, and he's with us today. So thank you very much, Jacob, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, you have started a lot of your own initiatives, and so now you're working with a company, and we'll get more into that in a second, a company that deals with office culture. Now, did you ever have a spell in HR, in human resources at all?
Not at all,
No,
really.
oh,
I mean, I've been employed, obviously, in other companies, and have always complained a lot about how broken a lot of the processes were and how things should have been done, but any formal HR training I've never actually had. I mean, I studied psychology, so there's some aspect of that baked into it. But as far as sort of, like you said, formal HR training, no, I don't come from an HR background.
Oh, okay. So at one point you considered, I guess one of the terms that you used to describe yourself as an employment engagement specialist. And so, what sort of experiences kind of informed that, that title, I guess?
Well, I think one of the things you mentioned before was, the interviews that I did with a lot of the leaders from a lot of these big companies like the Zappos, Rackspace, Netflix, some of these companies that are known for having an amazing company culture. That, in addition to a lot of interviews with some of our clients and some of our, just other thought leaders in the HR industry, and really just the research that I've done for a lot of the content that I produce, the ebooks and the guides and the blogs and this and that. When you combine all of that together, I really have learned quite a bit about sort of what it takes, what employee engagement means, what it takes to create a good company culture, what it takes to engage an employee. And so I really am grateful for all the, knowledge I've been able to soak up. And obviously I think I've done, a decent amount of research in terms of sort of how all that works, right?
Mm-hmm. I would certainly agree. I've read a number of your articles and they're quite informative. One of the articles I came across, which we'll talk about today, is the top 10 trends that will change the way we work. And this was, you put this back out in January 2016. And so I'll go through the list and maybe you could just give me a quick blurb on each item. So they're in no particular order. And so the first one is remote work. What are the trends that are happening with today?
So companies are starting to realize more and more that, working remotely is okay. The technology is there so that, employees can actually be as productive as they might be in an office environment, and they can have that, benefit of, choosing where they work, whether it be at home or from a coffee shop or whatever. So just to have that sort of control over their lives is really important. But yeah, so the trend there is more and more companies are starting to realize that, employees want this, and now because of the technology, it's possible.
Okay. Another one on the list, constant improvement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think, like you mentioned at the beginning, me too. I take courses all the time online. There's so many resources now, sites like edX, Coursera, Udacity, there's Codecademy. There's so many different websites, TED,
Sure.
this and that, to just continuously be learning. And so, as the workplace, let's say, or the work environment gets more and more competitive, talent needs to get more and more, educated, I guess you could say.
Sure.
So, so this focus on continuous improvement, because of all of the resources that are out there, is starting to come more and more.
Okay. Empowered employees. What does that mean?
Yeah, so basically, going from that sort of top-down, manager tells you what to do, environment, to a really more, employees having more autonomy, employees being more empowered to make their own decisions, basically. So I think now, with all the research that's been coming out about employee engagement and how important things like autonomy are, and how important, being empowered is, companies are really, thankfully, starting to realize that, they need to start empowering their employees and letting them shine, right?
Sure. And I mean, I think that employees that are happy are employees that are productive, and employees that stay for a longer time. So I would certainly agree with that. Another interesting one on the list is millennials having more power. There's so much discussion today about millennials in the workplace. What would you have to say about that?
Well, I think over the last couple of years, like maybe a couple of years ago, there were a lot of sort of myths about millennials, like they were entitled and spoiled and this and that. And I think more and more, as they're getting older, they're starting to, I guess, naturally take more positions of power.
Sure.
But I think people are really starting to realize that, they're not as, dumb as we might have thought. I think that's really the trend they're seeing there.
And I was having a discussion with a colleague, and one of the things that maybe separate Gen X from the millennials is their collaborative approach to things, which seems to be a bit different than the way a Gen X would do things. And that certainly brings a new dimension and energy to the workplace, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that has a lot to do, realistically, with social media and some of the technology that maybe millennials have just grown up with, like they were born with it, right? And it's even getting crazier. I mean, I have a younger cousin who's maybe 4 years old, and she can use an iPad better than I can, right? Just because she's born with it, right? So, as that technology usage grows, they become more, used to it, I guess. And so, like you said, they're maybe more collaborative by nature, just because of the way, let's say, social media works. They're so ingrained in it.
Yes.
Maybe you're right. That might be a difference between them and Gen X.
Sure. And the last point, I will, when I put some nice labels on this video, I'll put all 10 points there. But I wanted to talk about corporate social responsibility. What did you mean by that when you spoke about it?
Well, I think, again, and this probably has a lot to do with social media and kind of, I guess social media. A lot of companies are really starting to be exposed, I guess, for sort of either the bad practices they do or some of the good practices they do. And I think, again, this goes back to the millennials. They're also a lot more sort of conscious about the environment and how, the way the companies are giving back to their communities and this and that. So I think that companies are starting to realize how important it truly is to, to be socially responsible. And if they're not, how easy it is to sort of call them out on it, with smartphones and social media, at the flick of a button. You really can't hide under too much anymore as a company. So I think more and more companies are starting to understand, whether they like it or not, socially responsible.
Yes, and I think the fact that people want to work in places that have more of a social purpose and are responsible is also an incentive for employers to respond to that. Sure. So I think it's a good trend that's definitely developing, and I think it's probably here with us to stay. Do you see any new trends that maybe you didn't talk about on that list? Anything that's popped up? Where it's like, oh wow, this is new. This is kind of interesting in terms of workplace experiences.
It's tough to say. In all honesty, I know work-life balance is obviously a big focus. I think maybe it ties a bit into the continuous learning, but sort of coaching and development.
Okay.
Managers are like in the relationship with your manager at work, making sure they're there in that sort of mentoring experience.
Yes.
I think that more and more companies are starting to take that much more seriously. They're realizing how important their direct manager is, and so they're really starting to make a much more sort of deliberate effort to, let's say, connect the managers with their employees and offer training and this and that. So I don't think I mentioned that on the list, but I think that's a trend that you can see that has happened. Yeah.
No, I would certainly agree. There's been a proliferation of coaching services on the market, and it's not for C-level employees. It's not for executives. It's for quote unquote ordinary employees or everyday people, and it's becoming a part, kind of like one of the tools in the cachet for career development. It's not just something that you do when you graduate out of school, create a plan. It's an ongoing process. And so coaching is something that is becoming more of a requirement. And it's something that, is quite beneficial to us all.
Definitely.
Okay. So with that said, there's certainly a lot of information out there and a lot of talk about employee engagement. And one of the things you've noted is that a lot of companies still get it wrong. And the question is, why do you think that is?
There's a lot of reasons for it, in all honesty. I think that, well, for sure the biggest one, and this is my own opinion, is that it boils down to money. Sometimes, so there's two aspects on that. One is, if your business is suffering and maybe you're not making as many sales as you can, if you're a small business, you just literally don't have the time to focus on employee engagement, even though it's quite simple, but it's an afterthought because you're really focused on that next sale and making sure you can, make rent and make your paychecks and this and that. I think, and it's pretty much the same thing actually when you're a bigger business, especially public companies, in all honesty, are very short-term focused, right? So really all they care about, and actually really in any business, a lot of times managers are being, like their results are so, either monthly or quarterly focused, that they don't really have time to put the effort into that sort of long-term thinking, because employee engagement really is a long-term thing.
Okay.
It's easy to do, but it really is something, the kind of thing you need to be doing super consistently. And so I think that the way that a lot of things are structured, like both, like I said, with the small businesses, public companies, and even medium-sized businesses, the problem really, I think personally, boils down to that sort of short-term focus, right? And if you just have to hit your numbers or hit that next sale, you don't care so much about investing in your employees, because that really doesn't lead, it indirectly leads, but it doesn't directly lead to the next sale, right? So I think, I think more and more companies are starting to get the hang of it and understand how important it is. But I think the reason that a lot of companies still get it wrong really is because they're focusing on the wrong things.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Office Vibe now. So what is Office Vibe?
Sure. So Office Vibe is a software ultimately to help you measure and then improve employee engagement. So the way that we measure employee engagement is through frequent surveys. Okay, so a big problem with a lot of companies is they'll do an annual survey. It'll be 100 questions long, maybe even paper-based, and you'll never hear from it again.
Paper-based. I love that.
Anyway, it's just awful. Like every aspect of the traditional way surveys are done is just really horrible. And so, and even the annual aspect of it is so flawed because you need a more real-time sort of focus on what's going on with your team, right? So anyways, the way Office Vibe works is that each week we send employees 5 questions a week.
Okay.
At 100 question survey, let's say. So we send employees 5 questions a week. They answer that, that weekly questionnaire. They also have the ability to enter qualitative feedback, and then all of that information is gathered into a very easy to understand report for managers. And then what we also do, the software will also do, is provide tips to improve their engagement scores based on the data that it sees. So just quickly, we measure 10 different metrics of employee engagement. So things like happiness, wellness, relationship with your colleagues, this and that. And so as an example, if we see that wellness is scoring a bit lower, of course, we'll notify the manager that wellness seems to be trending down. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we'll offer tips to improvement in the form of either content to read or different activities they could try, or research or this and that, but anything basically that they can use to very quickly and easily improve that wellness score. So it's really just sort of simplifying the whole process of measuring and improving employee engagement.
Okay. And so I have a question for you. How often does an employee contact you for your services versus your traditional HR or say a hiring manager? How often do employees contact you?
Actually, never realistically. It's mostly either team leaders or HR managers. But let's say sort of those frontline employees, they're not the ones that usually request the service of Office 5. Because it's actually more the team leaders who will understand that there's a problem on his team, right, or his or her team. Mm-hmm. So they'll really understand that there's something going on that they need to improve, mm-hmm. and they'll be the ones to sign up for the service and see how it works, basically.
Oh, okay. I was just curious about that because employees know when things aren't going well as well. So I'm just wondering if they've ever reached out to you and say, can you contact my manager? We'd really like to have your service here. So who knows, maybe that's a B2C approach that you could use.
Maybe a new idea for Office 5 2.0 or something. But yes. Actually, in fact, they do reach out sometimes, but more through the content that I produce. So I've gotten actually emails to myself, or sometimes even comments on different blog posts, as an example, mm-hmm. where the employees will really express their concerns and they'll ask for advice and this and that.
Yes.
So we definitely do get some requests like that, but the software itself is really sort of geared more towards managers. Absolutely. So they're not sort of signing up for the software, but we have unfortunately been sort of contacted by some employees with some really interesting stories.
Being diplomatic, I'm sure. Okay, all righty. Can you give us an example of a company that you've worked with, and what sort of measurable improvements did they experience in using your product?
Sure. So, well, without mentioning any names, basically, sure. What I think is, well, maybe just very quickly, I'll talk sort of high level, and then I'll talk about a specific example. I think more than anything, and we're starting to get better at this, but I think it's actually very tough for us right now to actually sort of tie the usage of Office 5 to something like, let's say, turnover rate or something like that, because you need to start connecting different systems, and you really have to, you can indirectly correlate certain things, but it's really tough to boil down and say, like, this score on the relationship with manager metric in Office 5 directly affected that spike in turnover that we had. I mean, we're getting better at that, but it's pretty tough to do, in all honesty.
Okay,
so
sure.
What I think companies will see is sort of the overall vibe in the office, or the overall, their engagement scores, or the comments that they receive in the feedback section of Office 5. Those things improve, and that really might seem less important than your turnover rate and things like that, but that's really quite important in my opinion. So that's really where I think a lot of the focus is, at least now. Mm-hmm. And like I said, we're getting better and better at sort of tying it to those sort of traditional HR metrics like turnover rate and this and that. Yeah, let's say for a specific example, there's one company that's coming to my mind right now where their wellness score was low for about 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And we have a feature in Office 5 where you can create a poll to ask your employees just, sort of a one-off question.
Sure.
And they ask their, all their employee base, basically, what do we do? We have this low wellness score. What are some ideas that we can do to, to fix this? And so consistently, I mean, there were a bunch of good ideas, but consistently a recurring theme was, gym passes, gym memberships, this and that. And so I remember at the, what this company did at the monthly meeting, at one of their sort of quarterly meetings, let's say, was they announced that they were going to now pay for the gym memberships for all of their employees. And then slowly but surely you saw the wellness score going up, right? So it's those types of things. It's really those, that feedback loop that really the improvement comes in, right? So we ask employees what's on their mind. They tell us, we respond, and then we see improvements, right? And it doesn't have to be with every single thing. It's not as if every single request will be sort of answered or addressed. But, for the most part, if you can address those key things, or there's probably some quick wins that you can very easily.
Exactly.
Then I think that's where you'll see a lot of good sort of good bang for your buck, right?
Sure. And I think the company showing interest in what their employees are thinking is half the battle. Because if your employer never asks, then there's perception that they don't care. And so I can definitely see the value in just soliciting their opinion, because it shows the employer is trying to make an effort.
100%, yeah.
Okay. So can you tell me one thing that Office Vibe does to engage its employees?
Well, I think Office Vibe is in a unique and very cool position that, we do a lot of this research, and we preach a lot of this stuff to our clients, and we teach our clients kind of, what to do in these situations. So, it'd be silly if we talk the talk but didn't walk the walk, right? So we actually do almost everything that you would think would be, amazing to do. So there's quite a few things that are coming to my mind right now about cool things that we do. I think one of the coolest things that we do, though, is sort of the how flat our hierarchy is.
Sure.
I really think it's very important that, even the CEO, we can, go out for a drink with him. We can just, pull him aside and have a quick chat with him. That's very rare in a lot of companies. A lot of companies, employees are quite scared to even go talk to their manager and bring up an issue, this and that. Whereas, everyone, all the managers, at Office Vibe are very conscious about sort of letting the employees know, like, come to us whenever you want. We're equals. We're one of you guys, type of thing. So I really think the flatness of the hierarchy is so nice, I think, because it just, calms everyone down, right? And lets everyone just sort of address issues when they come up, and, behave in a much more friendly and nice way on the whole team, right?
Okay, no, that's great to know. And what's one of the favorite projects that you're working on now?
Right now, the coolest project we're working on by far is we're working on this thing where we're building an incredibly rich research report about the state of employee engagement across the entire world. Basically collecting different data points and survey questions from basically from all over the world. Literally, I don't know the exact number, but it's hundreds of thousands of data points. So it's one of the richest studies that have ever been done. Engagement. So it's we're coming pretty close to the end, and so that's been a very, very exciting but challenging, obviously, project. So super excited about that.
Okay, we will certainly look forward to the publishing, I guess, of that in its different formats. So the last question I have for you is, what is something you do at work to have fun?
Well, I think one cool thing the team does is every Friday we go out for lunch there's like a local restaurant right over here, and we just every Friday we go as a team, eat together, have a couple of drinks, have a good chat, have a good time. It's just a really nice way to kind of end the week and get that team building going, because during the week, Monday to Thursday, we're kind of heads down in our computers, really just focusing, trying to get some good results going. So I think it's a really nice way to kind of get all the different employees from the different departments together, sit down, have a nice meal with each other, have some good conversation, and just enjoy being with each other, right?
Okay, alrighty, sounds good. No lampshade dancing, but hey, that's not always needed. That's good too. Just people getting along and taking time to listen to each other and, making an effort to work together is a good thing. And I mean, one of the things I think that companies underestimate is the well-being of its employees and its effect on the bottom line. Happy employees produce. We can do more studies on it if you want, but I mean, we already have. And so it will be great when it really gains traction in the market. And a lot of employers commit to a long-term strategy of engagement. And as you said, they need to focus on the right things. And the people who provide their services are the people that they need to focus on. Not just the numbers, because the numbers will come when the people that are working for you are happy.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yes. Did you have anything that you wanted to add, Jacob?
No, just basically thank you for inviting me on this show. It's great.
Okay, no, thank you. I very much appreciate it. I know you're busy. You have a seminar coming up. So thanks for coming on Kwerks at Work, and we will be in touch.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.